The Core Formation Realm elders had never seen so many sword energies in their lives. Metal, wood, water, fire, and earth elemental sword energies formed an array. 2 dragons array formation. The dense sword energies circled around each other, freezing time and space. 160 sword energies instantly shattered the treasures from the Core Formation Realm cultivators. At this critical moment, Jacob suddenly gained an understanding of the Level 2 Sword Array Formation, 2 Dragons Array Formation. The nature essence surged up and swallowed everything. 2 forces pushed one another, forming a reverse tornado that tore open the surrounding space. The 2 Core Formation Realm cultivators, who had rushed over and tried to take Jacob's treasures, were instantly sent flying by the wave of the sword energies. The overwhelming force of the 2 Dragons Array Formation was far greater than the Snake Array Formation. More than 200 Foundation Establishment Realm cultivators tried to form an array to counter the force, but the force was so powerful that even Jacob couldn't control it, let alone the weak cultivators. The surrounding trees broke one by one, while the Foundation Establishment Realm cultivators were blown out like pieces of paper. Jacob took one step forward, and the group of cultivators scrambled to flee. At this moment, flying on a sword was suicidal, while running down the mountain gave them a chance of surviving. The release of 160 sword energies broadened the meridians in Jacob's body. New openings appeared in his dragon core, and there were now 65 openings in total. Gusts of wind blew up Jacob's hair, giving him a magnificent and invincible look. Jacob walked to Sophie's side and pulled her up gently. Sophie felt some numbness in her palm. When she looked up, she saw traces of lightning flash across his eyes. Jacob raised his right hand and pointed out one finger. The circling 160 sword energies traveled along his arm and shot toward the Grand Palace across the valley. The magnificent Cultivation Teaching Palace was shattered into a pile of debris by the violent sword energies. It must be noted that the Cultivation Teaching Palace had 4 overlapping defense array formations protecting it. A tiny sword energy turned back and pierced a hole in the hands of the Core Formation Realm cultivator who had tried to grab Sophie. Under the group attack, the 2 swords Jacob and Sophie got earlier lost their essence. Therefore, Jacob transformed his sword energies into a huge sword, lifting him and Sophie. His essences condensed into a sword that allowed them to fly on. The 5 Core Formation Realm cultivators were absolutely no match for the enraged Jacob. While these cultivators looked at Jacob, who was leaving, in horror, a young disciple flew over on a sword and shouted in a panicking tone, "First Elder, all the 1,000-year-old spirit herbs planted on the back mountain were stolen." Needless to say, the sword that was formed by the 5 elemental essences was immensely better than the ordinary swords. Therefore, its speed was more than twice the speed of the swords before. A flash of golden light was seen briskly crossing the sky. The members of the sects in Fifth Heaven, small or prominent, were shocked as they observed this golden light pass through their territories. They couldn't help but gasp, "Nascent Soul Realm!" Indeed, the speed of this travel technique, which relied on the burning of nature essence, was even comparable to the flying speed of a nascent Soul Realm cultivator. No matter how fine the materials were, the swords were still made with tangible items. Yet, the sword energy that was cast by Jacob was a sword that was made of pure nature essence. Carrying Sophie, Jacob exhaled deeply as he descended onto a common-looking mountain. The gigantic sword was then disassembled into 160 sword energies before returning to Jacob's body. This flight had exhausted a considerable amount of his nature essence. In the meantime, unable to withstand the loneliness, Snowflake was rolling about in the storage space. It was dying to come out. As Jacob opened the necklace, it instantly jumped out onto the grass. Snowflake was eager to participate in the intense battles that Jacob was in, but Jacob did not want to reveal Snowflake to the world yet, so he did not let it out. To protest Jacob's decision, Snowflake began tossing and jumping relentlessly. Ever since it had received the treasures made by Noah, Snowflake's speed had increased by a few dozen times. Besides the experience of accelerated flying, it always wanted to get a taste of real battle as well. Unsurprisingly, the animals on the land were no match for Snowflake. Even the tiger and lions would not have the courage to face Snowflake head-on. It was pointless to be overbearing in front of those weak animals. Hence, Snowflake became upset, as it felt like a hero with no place to display its power. Yet Jacob only treated it as a pet and wouldn't let it take part in battles, making Snowflake feel oppressed inside. After all, it was a snow lion and not a little pet dog. Slapping its paws, Snowflake chewed on the roots of the trees in the nearby area to express its annoyance and anger. On the other hand, thinking that Snowflake was simply playing around and enjoying itself, Sophie went over to give it a big hug. Despite the anger, Snowflake couldn't resist Sophie and instantly started turning and tossing in her arm.
"Snowflake is the cutest thing ever!"
Sophie was in a great mood and pressed her cheek affectionately against Snowflake's fur. Snowflake soon lost its will to fight. Straightening and stiffening its limbs, it surrendered itself to Sophie's gentle caressing of its belly. Seeing Sophie and Snowflake having fun, Jacob found a clean spot and sat down cross-legged while leaning against a big tree. As he had just achieved a breakthrough, used the two dragons array formation, and then dashed away on his sword energy, Jacob's reserve of nature essence was almost completely drained. Now that there was a little time to spare, Jacob immediately attempted to recover his nature essence. The level of chaos in Fifth Heaven had surpassed First Heaven by a significant degree. They needed to be prepared for any type of danger that might occur at any moment. Without the protection of a sect, ordinary cultivators had a high chance of being ambushed and killed by others. Slowly closing his eyes, Jacob absorbed the nature essence from the surroundings. The now hollow dragon core was desperately consuming the nature essence nearby. The intensity of the nature essence here was 3 times more than that of First Heaven's. Jacob could clearly feel that the energy throughout his body was steadily increasing, and the dragon core was also spinning faster and faster. Since dragon cultivators were born with such a great cultivation assisting device, their cultivation progress could be unimaginably rapid in such an environment where the intensity of the nature essence was high. Even though the dragon core in Jacob's body was originally from Sophie, it had become one with Jacob after his prolonged cultivation. Right now, there were 65 openings on it already. However, as the cultivation technique Jacob had was the Sword Shadow Scroll, which required the cultivation of all 5 elemental essences at once, Jacob was not taken as a dragon cultivator by others. With every breath he took, a small amount of nature essence swiftly entered his body. For the amount of nature essence that would typically take 3 hours to replenish, it only took an hour here. Refreshing. Incredibly refreshing. The battle went smoothly, and so did the recovery. His nature essence, which was almost depleted, had been fully replenished in no time. Resting in Sophie's arms, Snowflake was twitching its nose, hungrily sniffing the nature essence this place had to offer. Although elixir pills could also restore one's nature essence, nothing could be as natural and pure as the process of natural refinement like this. For demon beasts like Snowflake, the more often they stayed in places where nature essence was highly concentrated, the quicker their advancement would come. Suddenly, a black dash of light rushed toward them. Jacob looked at the time. as they had agreed upon, it had been precisely 2 hours. Breathing heavily, Noah was carrying a large sack on his back as he called out to Jacob and Sophie, "Let's go!" Noticing the anxious expression on Noah's face, Jacob did not bother to ask what he was up to. He certainly was up to no good. With a spin, Snowflake turned into its snow lion form and let Jacob and Sophie get on its back. Its golden paws were emitting specks of golden light. Standing on the black disk, Noah led the way through the blockage array formation between fifth heaven and the lower heavens. His sack was completely filled with spiritual herbs. Since he had just stolen these spiritual herbs, some were still heavily covered in soil. For this reason, he had to first take them back and wash them clean before placing them into his storage space. With just one visit from Noah, a few sects in fifth heaven suffered great losses. The mountains behind their residences, the spiritual gardens, and even the well-protected spiritual fields had all been overturned. Any spiritual herbs that were older than 500 years were dug out and snatched. There was nothing that they could do. Even if they sent out their entire sect, no one could catch up to Noah's flight treasure. Sadly, they could only watch Noah run for his life with the sack on his back. All the defensive and offensive array formations were nothing when put against this little master. Regarding theft and robbery, the gangs of hooligan cultivators on Fifth Heaven were nothing compared to Noah. He was in a league of his own.